I'm Phil Rickaby, and I've been a writer and performer for almost 30 years. But I've realized that I don't really know as much as I should about the theatre scene outside of my particular Toronto bubble. Now, I'm on a quest to learn as much as I can about the theatre scene across Canada. So join me as I talk with mainstream theatre creators you may have heard of and indie artists you really should know, as we find out just what it takes to be stage-worthy. If you value the work that I do on Stageworthy, please consider leaving a donation either as a one-time thing or on a recurring monthly basis. Stageworthy is created entirely by me, and I give it to you free of charge with no advertising or other sponsored messages. Your continuing support helps me to cover the cost of producing and distributing the show. Just 4 people donating $5 a month would help me cover the cost of podcast hosting alone. Help me continue to bring you this podcast. You can find a link to donate in the show notes, which you can find in your podcast app or at the website at stageworthy.ca. Now, on to the show. In this episode, I'm joined by members of the Élan Collective. Actor Misha Sharivkar, writer Michael Manning, and director Jeannette Lambermont-Morey to talk about their Toronto Fringe production of a Blank Canvas, or The Distance Between the Bridge and the Water, on now with the Toronto Fringe until July 16th. In this conversation, we talk about the origins of the play, how the collective came together, and much more. Here's our conversation. The show is Of a Blank Canvas. So who wants to give me the elevator pitch about what Of a Blank Canvas is?
Is that you, Jeannette, or me?
Okay, go for it. So it's Of a Blank Canvas, or The Distance Between the Bridge and the Water. That's part of the title as well. And this is an investigation into the dilemma that an artist, an artistic creative being, has when they bump up against a block, a creative block, a mental block, and the resulting mental health challenges that come with that. And it's really relevant right now because, of course, coming out of the pandemic, we all share a bit of that feeling. So this character goes on a journey to figure out what's wrong, how to balance things for themselves again, and on the way encounter some gods and some creatures and a pigeon and various fun characters. And at the end, it ends happily for us.
Well, that's good. The happy endings are good. Now this is the way you've described it. There's a cast of thousands.
Yes.
But actually a cast of 3, I believe. Is that the
That's
2 or
correct.
3? 3. So, how do you go about with this cast of thousands being portrayed by just a couple of people?
Well, I mean, like, at a technical level, I just sort of set out to write a bunch of three-handers. It was, I always believe that, like, restrictions breed creativity in a way. So that's actually, like, something I said for myself. I've sat down and start writing on this. I'm like, no more than 3 people in this. And how we've been sort of weaving that together thematically is looking at different aspects of the artist's person. And for myself, I think that, like, who you are is influenced by so many things. It's influenced by your family. It's influenced by your relationships, the people you've met, the things you've experienced. And so it's sort of looking at how you break that down into, like, fractions of the cycle.
Yeah, the 3 characters are 3 distinct parts of our artist. So there's the artist, the artistic being. There is the social citizen, the part of that human who's trying to interact with the rest of the world to be a productive and responsible member of society. And there's the child that has had traumatic experience of some sort and has to somehow reconcile that in an adult life as an artist.
It's interesting all of the limitations that you speak of and how that does breed creativity. You've got all these situations where people have like infinite money to create a massive set with lights and projections and all this sort of stuff, and yet sometimes when you pare that down, you just put like two people on a stage, it can be more moving and more special than having all the money in the world. So in terms of creating something that had the limitations, how did these limitations serve you in the writing process?
How did they serve me? Well, I would say that like when I was getting into it, because of these limitations and sort of how I wanted to go about this, I really didn't try to do any of the mental stitching through at the start. I sort of was like, you know what? I'm going to start writing these things that on their own insular bubbles feel right to me and feel like the voice in my head of like these characters is like speaking to me and telling me something interesting to follow. And that I didn't worry about how we stitch that together. It's just like, this is an important moment and I know this has to be in the story. And then trusting that the rest will come with time and like come with these fabulous characters in the room and watching them work. Be like, oh, this connects to this now. And like, I see how this character's through line, we start in this one story connects to like this other story. So I think it's just a lot of like forcing me to trust that it would be there.
So have you been editing as rehearsals are going on? Or are you discovering these connections just that they're already there?
Well, I'm going to jump in here because I'm also dramaturg on this, and we've been working for a couple of months already. So there definitely have been many iterations before rehearsal. This is just day 3 in the rehearsal hall. So we're right at the beginning. But I think what you're referring to, Michael, is how we're getting real detail, exquisite detail that's coming out of working with the actors. But the kind of core journey we have laid out already. And so we're working with a roadmap that we've all agreed on and finessing with that in mind now.
Nice. So I want to hear the story about how all of you came together to work on this show.
It was honestly all pure luck. Like everything that has happened for this production has just been luck. It all started when I think in the fall, one of our colleagues got us all to apply for the Fringe. So all of our whole friend group at George Brown, all joined in the lottery. And we all got together on the day that they announced the results. And we were all sitting in one of our castmates' room, waiting to hear the results. And they announced that I won the slot under the name of the Élan Collective, which was so exciting. But, I'm just a student in my second year of theater school. And this like daunting task of producing a whole show in just a couple of months with nothing was terrifying. And so obviously I leaned on my friends and I got Lambermont-Morey to co-produce with me. And we had a lot of options. We thought about potentially devising. We thought about looking at some of our friends' scripts. Michael's script was always on the table because we had all been reading it. We'd all been reading early drafts. And then Jeannette kind of approached us, having read Michael's script, and said, hey, this is really cool. I'd like to direct this. And then that's kind of where it started. So it started with, I would say, the 4 of us. So Michael, myself, Jeannette, and Michaela. And then slowly our team just grew over time. And pretty much everyone involved up until, I would say, a month ago has been all people in the circle of George Brown Theatre School. So just using our very humble connections and trying to make this show happen.
I'm going to jump in and challenge you there because the George Brown connections, your classmates, that is a very powerful group. That is, let's not refer to that as humble. Once you get a group of theater students together, that is a powerful group of people. So there's nothing humble about that. And it's a pretty good accomplishment to have a show that's coming out of theater school in your second year, because you will learn so much. And I'm curious, what have you learned so far about producing a show that you didn't know?
Everything. It is absolutely not what I thought it would be. It is one of the biggest challenges I've taken on in the last few years. I've sort of produced small community theater productions in the past, but this is not small. This is Fringe. It's Toronto. It would hypothetically be my Toronto debut. So there was a lot of pressure there. Takes a lot of organization. Oh boy, I honestly don't even know where to start because it is such a daunting task.
I mean, you just said that it was one of the most daunting things that you've ever done, but did you do a period study this year?
I know, and I would say period study was so hard. It made it so. Jeannette directed period study, and so it was easy because of that in a way, because of all the trust we have. But I would say producing is definitely slightly above period study, slightly above.
What I'll ask, what period did you do?
We did the Restoration era.
Oh shit. That was the era that my class did in 1990, whatever it was that I was at George Brown. So we also did the Restoration period.
Oh no, wait, what play did you do?
Oh shit. I don't remember. You're asking, I'm an old man. It's hard for me to remember. Did we do School for Scandal? Maybe we did School for Scandal.
Scandal is slightly later.
Yeah, no, it is, and I don't remember any of the plays that we did. I remember I have flashes of moments from that thing, but let's face it, it's 6 to 8 hours of performance, and after that, you just have to like erase as much of it from your brain as possible because you've crammed too much in there.
Oh, totally. I remember I had my main part in period study was at the very top of the day, and I remember coming off stage and just collapsing and praying I got 2 hours of sleep before I had my next entrance.
That is the advantage of period studies, that you can have a little nap in between. So in terms of the things that you didn't know when you were like figuring out how to produce a show at Fringe, did you learn from Jeannette, from your classmates? Where were you turning to learn about how to produce a show at the Fringe?
Firstly, Fringe has a really wonderful way of, I guess, sort of teaching you how to produce. They break every single aspect of it down into about 10 or so forms that you have to fill out. So in a way, that was kind of a training course of some sort. It really gave me like the outline of what to follow. And then the two people I leaned on the absolute most at all times was, of course, Jeannette, with all her experience, and my partner Ganesh, who has produced before, and he knows a lot. He's been a part of the tent program, as well as a bunch of producing sort of training programs. So he knew a lot, and with the combination of those two people, I was able to throw this thing together.
Nice. Now I will turn to Michael for a second, because Misha mentioned that this play has been floating around for a little while. Where did this play come from? When did you write it, and when did you first show it to Misha?
So as far as when I started writing it, it would have been about a year ago. I was finishing up the first draft, actually exactly during the Fringe last summer. Like had the finish on the last day of the Fringe show. I was like literally between like a day that I had gone to see, and then I hadn't even performed that. Finished the last couple pages, and was the first draft. I think even before like the first draft was fully done, I probably showed you some of that early stuff, right? When it was just like the first couple of scenes and like opening monologues. I'm a bit of an oversharer with my writing. I love to show people things in like finished stages and start getting like vibes and opinions and like just like those first gut reactions from people when they start to read stuff. So early versions of the script were completely drastically different than what we've been working on since. But some of the cores have been there for quite a while.
Oh, I remember Jeannette mentioned the pigeon earlier. I remember the day I read the pigeon, and was absolutely blown away about how genius it was. This was summer of last year, and I'd already seen, I think, read a couple of scenes. And this is, and back then I had no idea what Michael was writing. It was sort of like this mishmash of different things. What is this? But I know it's amazing.
Okay. Also, Jeannette, I don't know if I ever told you this story. Where Pigeon came from is...
Yes, I know the story.
Oh, you do
Go
know the
ahead.
story?
Tell them. They don't know.
So I was working on the script one day. I was just like sitting out at a bar with a friend and typing, and we were chatting. And she left to do some other stuff, and I just stuck around and worked. And her plate was sitting there. And so I look up, and there's literally a pigeon perched on the table looking at me like, can I have the plate? And it would not go away no matter how hard I shoot it. And the thought in my brain I had was just like, okay, you want to play hardball? I'm turning you into my play. No idea where to go.
Nice. Nice. Interesting. Speaking about being an overshare, I don't know if you've read any of Austin Kleon's work. For example, the book "Share Your Work." And he talks about the importance of sharing work, and quite widely that we don't necessarily need to hide it from the world. We don't need to hide it under a bushel. We can show it and share it, and we can learn so much. And I'm sure that in showing it to people, you were learning about how people were reacting as you did so.
Totally. And I think also it comes that feeling of like wanting to share with a larger audience. I think also comes from my writing background. I really cut my teeth doing like sketch work in like big writing groups where we would have like 8 to 10 like big writers working on a show. So because of that, it's always just sort of been like part of my process where I'm like, okay, just like this first draft, don't really worry about the editing, don't worry about polishing it. Give it to someone and like see what their opinions are, because if you go in and edit on your own, no idea if you're going down a spiral. What you're writing isn't actually anything.
There's something about writing where there's literally almost always the fear, and that's why whenever I write something, I put it away for like 2 weeks to a month, distance, and then come back to it and try to look at it as if I wasn't the person who wrote it. And suddenly then I realize, oh no, it's not as good as I thought. Or here's the things that actually work. It's funny how distance will allow you to do that. Jeannette, as the dramaturg and director of this show, what was it that first drew you to this particular script?
Okay, so quite simply, the writing. It's a very early draft. It wasn't yet in a full script form. It was, as they've described, fragments. But there is something in Michael's voice, something in the way he crafts a word on the page that really attracted me. And I knew this is good writing. This is worthy of us digging into and, taking further. Also, of course, I did period study with these fellas and the rest of the team as well, and got to know them as artists. And this piece is about, and Michael, you didn't mention it, but it is autobiographical to some degree, and getting to know you during that intensive process illuminated what you were writing about for me. And it became even more interesting as a result. And it sort of sprang from there.
Yeah, I will say, there's nothing like the period study to teach you about your classmates and yourself, and really who you are as performers. I think there's something about that intensive weeks of rehearsal and immersion into a period, and then like a 6 to 8 hour performance of all of the scenes that you've worked on, to really show you who you are and who your classmates are, and everybody else who works on it gets to see that too.
Yeah, period study is like a festival, right? I mean, you're saying 6 to 8 hours. I've had as long as 12 hours.
Yes,
because it depends on the size of the class. If everyone's going to have a fair amount to work on, and it's a huge class, it's going to extend the length of it. But it is a festival atmosphere and festival approach to the period and to the era. And so we see a lot of faces, a lot of different sides of these actors.
Now, Jeannette, you have just a history of supporting playwrights and playwriting voices and new playwriting voices, and that's a passion of yours. So, how was that developed as something that you focus on yourself? That's become a.
We've lost you.
We're back. Hold on.
We're back.
We're back. Okay.
We missed
it. Saved it. So I was just saying about, and I can fix this later.
Okay.
Just wondering about how this became a passion of yours, something that you wanted to focus on, the supporting new playwriting voices.
Wow, that's a really good question, Phil. It's really hard to say. I think it all springs from the same seeds as wanting to work with young actors. It's young creators, and not necessarily young in years, but in career. There's a sort of joy and also the fear, but there's also not knowing yet fully how evil and mean the world can be, and so there's risk taking. And you know what else? It keeps me young, or at least I like to think that it does. And I feel it. I feel it to stay sort of on the pulse of what's being bandied about now. What are the subjects that interest our new writers, our new actors, our new designers, our new creators? And I really seek the older I get, the more I seek joy in the room, and forget this idea of some sort of impossible to achieve perfection. It's about how we work together in the room. That's going to be the product. That's going to be what ends up on the stage. And if we have a shitty time, excuse my language, oops, edited.
No. This is a podcast. We can swear all we want.
Okay. So if we have a shitty time in the room, there's probably going to be some of that shit on the stage that we don't want. So I'm quite inspired.
I think that theater is one of the few industries where people of various ages work together regularly. And I've noticed that over the years, the more people that I know who are from different generations, the less I sort of calcify as I get older. My outlook doesn't calcify. Continual growing and learning from different generations as we get to know each other. And I think that theater is really the one industry that brings people together and actually makes them work as equals. Other industries might have the older people above and the younger people below, but theater doesn't really do that.
Yeah, that's really well said. In fact, I've often said that I feel like these young folks are mentoring me. So it's not that image of, you're older, therefore you're the mentor, and they're, the one that has to learn everything. It works both ways. It absolutely works both ways.
Now, Jeannette, you mentioned the joy in the rehearsal hall, which is so important because I think that everybody who's ever rehearsed something, and of course, this kind of thing is also famous in the media, has had an experience in a rehearsal hall that was less than joyful, that might have been really bad. Is the pursuit of joy in the rehearsal hall something that you have always pursued, or is that something that you came to as you practiced directing and dramaturgy?
That is another excellent question. Of course, if you asked the me of 20 or 30 years ago, I would have said, oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course, I'm pursuing joy. But if I look back now, no, I was much more fixated on end product and, getting it right and impressing the right people and, product over process. Are we still, I feel like we're breaking apart.
No, you're still good. You're still good.
Okay.
This is my computer trying to open up Outlook in this moment.
Oh, okay. That's what it is.
Which we're not going to do.
Yeah, okay. I'll go. You're going to edit all this out, and I'm going to pick up again from, as you know, I spent a lot of years at the Stratford Festival. Wonderful years, and I don't regret a second of it, but there's an enormous amount of pressure there to meet a certain standard and to create something that looks like the machine made it, right? The Stratford quality control machine. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was yearning to break free of that and make a mess and, try things that are not necessarily right. And in fact, what I've learned recently is the less certainty I have that the product is going to be good, the more exciting the process is. I know that sounds backwards. But Misha and I just worked on a show actually recently where I had no idea if that show was going to work. No idea at all. And it made the process so much more exciting and exhilarating and a kind of freedom. It released me from, this nonsense of I have to be great in some way.
I think that mess is healthy for the theater. I think that when something is too polished, too clever, too clean, that it feels like an AI picture, which looks great, but there's something wrong. It's like the hands have like 6 fingers or something. It just like it looks on the surface great, but underneath it's missing something. And mess really gives us the opportunity to really play in the muck, to really find some real meaning, I think.
Yeah. Because otherwise it's polished. Otherwise we've polished all the edges off of it, right? We want
Yeah.
those edges. We want prickles. We want,
Yeah.
muck and broken things. Broken is fabulous to watch. You know, I mean, I hate to say it, but it is.
It's true.
That is what theater is, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, we there are edges in life, and when our theater doesn't have those edges, it feels something's missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to ask. I'll start with the two George Brown students with my favorite question, and we will move to Jeannette afterwards. But when my favorite question is always to find out what people's theater's origin stories are. Everybody has that thing that was the moment where suddenly something awoke in them and said, "This is what I want to do." And so I'll ask for each of you, what was that for you?
Can I go first? Sure. It's hard to put my finger on exactly what that was because I think there was like a lot of little moments that should have given me the hint earlier in my life. And looking back now, it all makes so much sense. Like as a child, me and my cousin, who is now a drama teacher, we would put on shows in the basement for our relatives. We'd make them come down, pay a nickel, and we would sing and dance at like 3 and 4. It's like from the earliest age, we would be performing for them. And I loved doing plays in school. I did musical in high school, kept doing musicals through university. But somehow in my brain, there was still a part of me that's like, oh, I can do this on the side. This doesn't need to be the thing I spend all of my time doing. And then eventually I realized, oh, wait, that's wrong. This is the thing I need to be doing all of the time, or I am miserable because I know what I could be doing.
Were you about to pursue something else? Were you like going to be like, I'm going to study architecture or something like that? Was there another thing that was going to be your study while you did theater on the side?
There was, in fact. I had a full career as an engineer, 5 years,
Okay.
tried to make that work, was absolutely miserable doing it. And like I had a boss sit me down for a performance review and basically say, Michael, you've been miserable this past year. What is going on? And I kind of had to admit to them that I'm like truly, I don't want to be here. I'm doing this for the money. And, had a very nice boss who, I had the kind of relationship with where I could tell them that straight up and not be worried about getting fired right away.
Yeah, for sure. So when you made that discovery, when you were like, okay, so I'm miserable as an engineer, was it difficult for you to come out to your family as an actor and say that I'm going to go to theater school and this sort of thing? What was that like?
It was definitely a little scary. I mean, it's a weird sort of thing to have to sit down at like late in your 20s and be like, so I'm full on switching my career path and I'm going back to school and all of that. They were very supportive, which I was honestly a little concerned about because I have very strong memories about trying to go into a more performance related field coming out of high school, getting shot pretty hard. To the point where I was like, I want to audition for this program at U of T. And I remember the response was, oh, you don't. So that was a little rough. And I think having talked to them, there was some debate about how exactly that conversation went. Because I remember that exact phrase of, no, you don't. And they're like, we never said that to you.
Right. Now, Michael, how old were you when you started at George Brown?
Oh, geez. When did we start?
2021. November 2021.
Yeah, so I was 29.
Okay. I asked for a very specific reason because when I started at George Brown, I was 19, 19. And most of my classmates were the same age. And I just have distinct memories of the late, great Peter Wilde spending, like, just expounding on how he wished that we were all 30. Like, I wish you would come back to me when you're 30. And we were all like, shut up, old man. We know what we're doing. And in some ways, I wish that I was 32. I wish that in some ways he's right. Do you feel like you've had, because you had time outside of school, time to get a little older, that you had a bit of a different experience than your classmates who may have been younger had?
Certainly. It's hard though, because you would think being 30, it's like, oh, you feel so stable in yourself and like you know who you are before you come in at 30. And I'm realizing just as much as everyone else, I am still discovering that all of that is coming out now. I think what it did do for me was a certain sense of perspective and really solidified in my brain that like, I know why I'm here. And, you know, no matter how bad it gets, I always have that memory of like, remember what it was like being an engineer for all those years? Like, you spent so many years of time working at the thing you didn't want to do so you could be here. And I think it helps, you know, it helps keep me humble, helps keep me motivated.
Sure. There's also that thing that I've heard multiple actors say, and I think is true, that if you can do anything else, do that.
Yeah.
And I think having that experience probably shows you that this really is it, and there isn't any doubt. Because I think if there is any sort of like, oh, like I could go learn psychology and do psychotherapy, you might do a career switch.
Mm-hmm.
You might really struggle in the industry, that's really, or in an industry rather, that's really, really tough. So,
yeah. Misha, I would love to hear your theater origin story.
Yeah, it's actually surprising. It's not surprising. Very similar to Michael. I also grew up. I remember probably as early as 5, I would get up on my parents' bed and pretend I was Avril Lavigne and do a concert for my grandmother and my mom. And just had the most fun performing. I was always addicted to performing in some way, shape, or form. But my theater journey sort of came in 2 waves, I would say. The first wave was the first time I ever was put in a musical or a theater show. I was in Willy Wonka Jr. in grade 5. And I was cast as Mike TV. It was my first time ever having lines, playing a character. And I very distinctly remember walking on stage, holding my little Nintendo DS, which was my prop, gluing my eyes to it for fear of seeing the whole audience in front of me, and just doing it. And having the time of my life. And then afterwards, my parents coming up to me and being like, "Oh, you can act." And they were shocked as well. And I was shocked. And then shortly after that, I did a couple of art schools. I did an arts elementary school, an arts high school, did lots of community theater. Then I went to university for neuroscience, and studied neuroscience for a while. I have a couple of published papers actually out there. And my second wave came at the end of my degree. It was in the middle of the pandemic. I was in an evolutionary psychology class. And I just remember sitting there and being like, I want to be acting right now. At the time, I was directing a production of Into the Woods online. Let's not talk about that. And I just, all I wanted to do was be anywhere but there. And so I graduated and on a whim applied to George Brown and began my professional career on a whim.
So how old were you when you started at George Brown?
I was, I must have been 22.
Okay.
Yeah, 22.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not quite, because, you know, it's funny because I think the reason why I think Peter was often right about, and I don't know if he knew this, he probably did. When we are 18, starting in the theater school, we are so goddamn stubborn and so convinced that we know everything that it's hard to teach us. We're also very malleable, so people get away with shit. But when you get a little older, you don't have the backbone, but you also know a little bit more about what you don't know. So I think that you know it was probably important for us to go out and do a little something before we went to theater school. But you know, we were young kids and we knew better than that guy.
Yeah.
Jeannette, I'm so curious because, you know, I know you, but I don't know the answer to this. What is your theater origin story?
Well, it's very vivid for me. It's very early. There's no theater in my family at all, but when I was just about to turn 3, my birthday is New Year's Eve. So it's very easy to locate where we are in time. It was Christmas before I was turning 3, and my parents took me to the Christmas play in the church. We didn't go to church regularly, but for Christmas we did. And I remember every second of this performance, I was riveted. And at the end, there was an intermission in the middle, and the baby Jesus had been put into a manger. And some of the other kids went down to peek into the manger, but my mother wouldn't let me go. So I was imagining Jesus in the manger, and I wasn't allowed to go look. But at the end, they walked up the center aisle, and the woman playing Mary was carrying Jesus in her arms. So as she was passing, I got up, and this is how I know I was really little, got up on the pew and over her arm so I could see baby Jesus, and she tipped her elbow so that I couldn't see. And in that moment, I had like a lightning bolt realization. There's no baby. It's make-believe. It's fabulous, right? So in that moment, this eureka of the magic that I had believed this baby was there the whole time and there's no baby, there was no turning back. I went home. I made my brother play all the other parts. We acted this thing out over and over. I also did what I called basement theater, for all my friends and neighbors and all had to come and pay money. And we did Cinderella and Rapunzel and all kinds of plays. And there was no looking back. But it's very, very clear in my memory, that event. Yeah.
Do you remember? So that was an event that happened when you were 3 that sort of like became like this mind virus that kept you going. But at a certain point, you made a choice and said, I'm going to do this for a living.
Yeah.
Do you remember that moment? Because there's the child's realization, and then there's something when you're older where you just keep going with it.
Yeah, no, I always knew. I always knew. I did. I was doing drama things during public school, and then I went to university and studied theater. And my father was determined I should be a lawyer. He kept saying, "You're very smart. You should be a lawyer." And I said, "No, no, 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 no." The only thing was they wouldn't let me go to NTS. They wouldn't support because NTS was not a university. Right. So I went to university. But I always knew there was really no other. There was no other path. I've done other jobs, but they're always the side hustle, right? I worked for the Royal Bank, and I waited tables for centuries and that sort of thing. But no, I've always done theater.
Yeah, my day job is my side hustle, and I'm fortunate that my manager knows that. Like,
that's right. Exactly.
I have an office job. They know that that's not the real job. You know. Yeah. Exactly. No, Jeannette. You're living in Newfoundland. I was like going through all of the maritime provinces there for some reason. You're living in Newfoundland, but you haven't always lived in Newfoundland. What was your draw to Newfoundland?
I was really lucky that in 2009, so more than 10 years ago now, I was brought out. At that time, I was executive director of the Shakespeare Globe Centre of Canada, which doesn't exist anymore, but you may remember it. And in my capacity in that job, I was invited to come out to Newfoundland to give my opinion. They were building a kind of pretend Globe Theatre thing to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the establishment of the first English colony in Cupid's, Newfoundland. And I got to know the folks that were doing that, fell in love with the location, with the idea, with the building. They invited me to come and do a text workshop the next year, which was fabulous and fun and fulfilling and wonderful. And then the 3 lads who formed it all went off in different directions to Stratford and to various places and asked me to step in temporarily as interim artistic director while they were looking for a local person who could do it. And that was enough time for me to really dig my heels into the province and understand that I loved it there. My husband came out to visit. We did some holidays. He fell in love with it too. And at one point we bought a country property like way around the bay, and would come for a couple of months a year to spend time there. One day sitting out on the deck with a glass of wine, we looked at each other and said, Jesus, why don't we just move? Like, we love it so much. So we bought a house in St. John's, moved there, and bang, the pandemic hit. Like within 2 months of moving there. So It was a very strange start.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we've emerged out of that. And it's fab. It's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah. Now, Misha and Michael, you guys would have started at George Brown during the pandemic. So were you doing Zoom classes at that time? Were you in person? Was it a mix of the two? What was school like at that time?
Yes. It was a little bit of everything. I think when we first came in, it was
first semester was mixed, I think, right?
Yeah, I think it was 3 days online and 2 days in person. Or it was Monday, Wednesday. Oh no, it changed based on what group.
Yes.
So 2 days you were in person and 3 days you were online, and it was like that for the whole first semester. Always masked when you were in person. So you can imagine us sort of in our like little rooms doing movement classes and and doing improv on Zoom. It was very, very strange.
Led to some wild classes. We did contact improv without touching each other, which was an experience.
Yeah,
That is wild.
Yeah.
That is wild.
it really was. Improv was really interesting because we got to put on backgrounds and sort of immerse ourselves. Same thing with storytelling. Storytelling was really, really fun because we got to bring props and it was a bit more immersive. And then our second semester, there was a spike at the beginning of it, right? So we were completely online for 2 weeks, and then we were in person the rest of the time, right?
Full in person the rest of that semester.
Yeah, but always masked. So that was very strange. We were watching the third year rep shows, and they had these special masks. I think Jeannette directed those.
The costumes had masks.
Right.
We did our Shakespeare scene study, our contemporary scene study, all masked. With air filters in the room.
Yeah. The idea of doing improv while masked is about as bad as trying to sing chorally while masked, because if you're on Zoom, there's a 0.5 millisecond delay, which is just enough to fuck everything up. Timing doesn't work. I remember early on in the pandemic, our work there would be a birthday and everybody was like, all right, we're gonna sing happy birthday to the person, and it was such a mess that we never did it again because it was the most dissonant, disgusting thing anybody had ever heard. So I can only imagine what improv is like when the timing is off by milliseconds.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was definitely a thing. But it's funny that you mentioned music, because we did music online as well, and we were kind of sent recordings, and we would have to send videos of us practicing these recordings, and then at the end of the year, we all recorded ourselves singing just our parts, and then doing kind of a dance to Beyonce's Single Ladies. And then it was kind of thrown together in a giant Zoom collage. And it was honestly kind of a disaster, but it was fun. It was lots of fun dancing in my house with my tights on. And
I'm trying to remember, because when I was in theater school, tiny room is what I lived in because I didn't need it. I can only imagine trying to do any kind of movement class in a tiny room.
Oh God.
Did you have to rearrange your rooms? Like, what did you have to do?
There was a whole big thing with structures at the start of the year. Clear out this much space over your computer. And thankfully our movement teacher was very accommodating.
She is lovely. She's one of the most accommodating people I know. Suzanne Liska.
Oh yeah.
Wonderful person. I didn't get the opportunity. My room, I lived in a small apartment at the time with my parents, and I quite literally had like, I think 50 square feet. It was nothing. Half of it was taken up by my single bed. So I had about this much space. Like maybe a meter of space to do full on like movement and all that stuff.
There was some interesting stuff Suzanne made us do though, like things with like feeling like the objects around your room and like, moving with them in like interesting ways.
Yeah. And there were other cool accommodations. Like she would have us go outside for a walk and sort of notice things on our walk and then compete, if I remember correctly, based off that.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Nice.
They made it work. They definitely made it work.
Yeah. You have to. You have to, You've got to keep it. You've got to keep people engaged, and it is hard to keep people engaged in a digital meeting for any length of time.
Oh yeah.
Just returning to Fringe, you're going to be bringing this show to the Tarragon main space. Have you guys had your site tour yet? Is that coming up? How do you feel about moving into the space?
You saw it?
Yeah, already had the site tour. Honestly, I think we hit the lottery with getting the space. Like we were looking at the list of spaces when they were figuring out what venue we'd be in. And I'm pretty sure Tarragon was the one we were like, fingers crossed, like praying for at night, like please here.
Originally, we really wanted Crows. We really wanted Crows. Mostly because we were all in East End, all of us that live here.
Right.
And so we wanted to go to Crows, but they're not an option this year. And Tarragon was such an...
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that Crows wasn't in this year. It's always hard when some of the venues like switch around.
Yeah. not the big venue at least. I don't know if their small space is in it or not, but we're in the large venues categories.
Yeah.
We only got those.
Yeah. As you prepare for the opening of Fringe in just a couple of weeks, as we record this, because this will be going online in the middle of Fringe. What is, aside from performing this show, what are you most looking forward to at Fringe this year?
Oh God, good question. I'm really excited to see some of the other work. There's some really, really exciting stuff going on. Frankenstein-esque comes to mind. The Bad Mitzvah looks really cool. Yeah.
The Man with the Golden Heart or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Musical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some really, really cool shows going on. And I'm also really interested to see how the show lives on stage, because we have no idea, right? We have no idea how people will react to it. We've only blocked half of a third of it even, right? So it's, I guess we'll sort of be in the thick of it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how people are responding.
One of the things I love about Fringe so much is the camaraderie between all the little companies, and sharing space with other companies and being in line and encouraging each other to come to each other's shows. That the whole the large extended family of it is just an amazing and powerful part of the whole experience. Yeah.
The Fringe family is an amazing thing that you really start to experience over time. I remember years ago doing a Fringe tour starting in Montreal, and there was a little seminar about performing at Fringe in Montreal. And one of the artist that was running the thing said right off the top, just remember, there is audience enough for everyone. Mm-hmm. And those words became, because I would see, I'll occasionally see companies that are like, we're competing for audience. And it's like, you're not. There is audience enough for everyone. You just have to, the more you share, the more you get out of it and the more audience you find. So it's like one of those, the Fringe family, when it shares, is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
What a beautiful sentiment. I love that. I really love the concept of that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so we're back at the Transact this year for the Fringe tent, Fringe patio, which to me is nostalgia and for other people is strange.
It's nostalgia, definitely.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
There are shows that you're looking forward to seeing and things like that. Are you? Because the thing about performing a show for the first time, and I've found this, is there's a moment when you start and you're like, especially for the first performance, where you might not be on stage, but you are holding your breath because you're waiting for that moment. There's, whether it's a laugh, a gasp, something that will tell you that it's working.
Yeah.
And that moment is like the most important moment of any show. And I've had that quite a few times. We're doing shows with Keystone Theatre, with other devised shows where you're just waiting. If you get that laugh, it's working because nobody's seen it outside of you. And so it's a mystery. Do you know what that moment is for you when this happens, that you'll know that it's working, or have you not discovered that yet?
For me, my gut reaction is that it's like the range from the audience. Like I want them to be laughing at the jokes, but also settling into more serious moments. Because I think my big worry is that they're going to think it's one type of thing or the other. And
yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, it's an interesting question, Rick. I'm sorry, Phil. What did I do that for?
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Oh yeah.
Sorry about it. Apologies.
That's okay.
Specifically, or just any or other?
Rick specifically. Rick's last name. Rick specifically.
Yeah.
I will have people reply to emails that say, "Hey, Rick," and my name is like right there. So anyway, please go
sorry
on.
about that, because I'm very well aware that what your name is, Phil. I don't know yet what that one moment is that you're asking about, because we don't completely know what we have yet. I mean, that's sort of part of the fun. And this show that I was talking about earlier that Misha and I just did also had the pendulum would swing very far between raucous farce and deep drama, all contained in the same show. And we had no idea if that was going to work, and it did. So I am no longer afraid of a show that has mixed mediums in it because I know they can work. But what that moment will be, I don't know yet. I'll let you know.
Please. I'll be interested to hear after you've had your first performance, what that moment was and how it felt when you heard it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think the moment, I have a few guesses what the moment will be.
Yeah.
But I won't share. You come see the show. But I think what really, for me as an actor, what's sort of the thing for me is when I can, not necessarily the laughs, but when I can really feel the audience sort of leaning in and listening and being with me. So I'm really curious when that is going to happen in the show, because I know for this specific run, it can really happen at any moment, depending on the audience member. And for that last show, the show that Jeannette and I just did, I remember there's a scene, a very, very dramatic, hard scene that comes right after a very comedic scene. And I remember coming off stage for the comedic scene, hearing all the laughter, and knowing that I'm about to walk on stage, sobbing, and the audience is going to think it's comedy still. And sort of, and you hear the laughs kind of at the beginning, they kind of trickle in and out. And the really, really addictive thing for me in that run became the moment when I felt them clue in and then lean in and then listen. That feeling is the best.
There's nothing like pulling the rug out from an audience like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because that very moment, I experienced it so much as the director too, because I could feel the audience feel a little ashamed that they had laughed, right? They're going, oh my God, a minute ago I was laughing at this young man. But this is the trauma that he was going through. Oh my God, right? Huge for the audience.
Yeah. I love it when an audience reacts to things like that, especially when it's like visceral like that. You can really, for me, that's when you're like, and that's why we do theater, and that's why this isn't a movie or a TV show.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the audience is a beast. The audience is like an entity in and of itself. It's like groupthink, right? It's so, and they're all different. It's really, really interesting facing that every night. Mm-hmm. And hopefully conquering it. Maybe not.
And being very aware that every audience is different, so that you're not starting to build up expectations.
That is death. You have that mistake. You do that once.
Yes.
Like you have a show where you do that once, and then you never do it again because you're like, oh, this is the funny part, and you're like, ha ha, and nobody laughs, and you're like, we are so fucked. Like, and then you just have to like reevaluate everything and be like, we can't have any expectations. We just have to do this and let them decide what they think is funny.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Misha, Michael, Jeannette, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time, especially having joined me just after a rehearsal. Thanks so much.
Oh, it was fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Thank you for having this conversation with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
This has been an episode of Stageworthy. Stageworthy is produced, hosted, and edited by Phil Rickaby. That's me. If you enjoyed this podcast and you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a 5-star rating. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a review. Those reviews and ratings help new people find the show. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Stageworthy and my other projects, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to philrickaby.com/subscribe. And remember, if you want to leave a tip, you'll find a link to the virtual tip jar in the show notes or on the website. You can find Stageworthy on Twitter and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website with the complete archive of all episodes at stageworthy.ca. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and as I mentioned, my website is philrickaby.com. See you next week for another episode of Stageworthy.